What kind of place has mountains older than dinosaurs, rivers that have been killing people longer than written records exist, and roads where the locals don't just respect the danger, they name it, warn about it, and still lose neighbors to it every single year? What kind of place earns a reputation not from legend or myth, but from documented body counts, emergency rescue logs, and geological surveys that read like horror stories? Appalachia is one of the most misrepresented regions in the United States. It is called backward, overlooked, and misunderstood. But the most dangerous places in Appalachia aren't misunderstood at all. They are precisely, specifically, and in several cases, statistically lethal. So which places made the list, and why should anyone who is planning a visit think twice before going in alone? These are the 20 most dangerous places in Appalachia. Number 20, the New River Gorge, West Virginia. The name is one of the great geographical deceptions in North America. The New River is not new. It is one of the oldest rivers on the planet, somewhere between 300 and 360 million years old, which means it has had an extraordinary amount of time to perfect the art of killing people. The gorge drops more than 1,000 feet from rim to river. The water runs cold year-round. The hydraulics beneath the surface bear no resemblance to what the surface looks like on a calm afternoon. There are over 60 named rapids packed into 14 miles of canyon, and several of them have reputations that experienced kayakers discuss in the same tone that surgeons use to describe difficult procedures. When the National Park Service elevated the gorge to national park status in 2020, visitation increased significantly. The warning signs stayed the same. The number of rescues and drownings did not decrease. The New River doesn't care how experienced anyone thinks they are. It has been practicing longer than humanity has been keeping score. Number 19. Breaks Interstate Park, Virginia and Kentucky. The Russell Fork River cuts through Pine Mountain and produces a canyon so deep and dramatic that people call it the Grand Canyon of the South without exaggerating very much. The gorge drops 1,650 feet. The whitewater at the bottom is among the most violent in the eastern United States, but the canyon itself is only half the danger. Upstream sits Flanagan Reservoir, and when the dam releases for scheduled drawdown events, the Russell Fork transforms from a manageable technical river into a Class 5 gauntlet in less than 2 hours. Kayakers time their runs to the release schedule, miscalculate by even a narrow margin, and the river resolves the situation on its own terms. In 1967, a bus went off one of the park's roads and into the gorge, killing multiple people. The canyon has never pretended to be forgiving. It simply waits for the next miscalculation. Number 18. Dolly Sods Wilderness, West Virginia. Dolly Sods looks like it was placed here by mistake. The landscape sits at over 4,000 feet on the Allegheny Plateau and resembles Canadian tundra more than Appalachian forest, sphagnum bogs, stunted wind-bent trees, open heath stretches that offer no shelter and no sense of direction. GPS signals behave erratically near the bogs. Fog arrives without announcement. Temperature drops of 30 degrees in under 2 hours are not considered unusual events by local search and rescue teams. They are considered Tuesday. But the most specific danger at Dolly Sods isn't meteorological, it's buried. The U.S. Army used this plateau for training during World War II and did not recover everything they brought in. Unexploded ordnance still surfaces after heavy rain. Park signs explicitly warn visitors not to touch any metal objects found on the ground. Dolly Sods is among the most beautiful wilderness areas in the Appalachians. It is also technically a scenic minefield with weather problems. Number 17. Linville Gorge, North Carolina. Linville Gorge is one of the most rugged wilderness corridors in the entire eastern United States, and its rescue statistics reflect that distinction clearly. The walls drop nearly 2,000 feet in places. Several marked trails arrive at cliffs with no obvious next step. Experienced hikers have found themselves clinging to sandstone faces they had no plan to be on. The Linville River looks peaceful in the swimming sections. Those same sections connect to Class 4 and Class 5 rapids that don't give warning before they appear. People have drowned in River Gorge while believing they were in a swimming hole. Cell service is essentially non-existent throughout the canyon. When rescues are needed, response times regularly exceed 6 hours. The National Forest Service warns explicitly that the River Gorge wilderness requires navigation by map and compass and offers minimal trail maintenance. The most dangerous thing about River Gorge is not the terrain itself. It is the photographs. People look at the photographs and decide they are ready. Number 16. Highway 421, the Snake, Tennessee, and Virginia. U.S. Route 421 through northeastern Tennessee and southwestern Virginia does not kill people through drama. It kills them through arithmetic. The road descends several thousand feet over a short horizontal distance through a long sequence of tight switchbacks. Heavily loaded coal trucks use this road as a regular commercial route. Guardrails appear and vanish at intervals that suggest they were installed by someone working from a budget, not a safety study. Local truckers have their own name for the most difficult sections. They call it the Snake. Residents who have lived within sight of this road for decades will not drive it in rain. They will not drive it in fog. They treat certain stretches the way a sensible person treats a warning label, as information to be acted upon, not reconsidered. The accidents here don't accumulate into a single headline event. They happen one at a time, in the dark, in the rain, while everyone else is asleep. Number 15. Mount LeConte, Tennessee. Mount LeConte rises to 6,593 feet inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and the Smokies receive more precipitation annually than almost anywhere else in the eastern United States. At LeConte's elevation, precipitation doesn't always fall as rain. The 5 trails that reach the summit become technical ice problems after a single cold night, and a cold night in the Smokies can arrive in late September and not leave until April. The Alum Cave Trail is the most popular route. It features wooden log steps that families in sneakers use cheerfully on summer mornings. After a hard freeze, those same steps become ice obstacles that require microspikes and experience the people wearing sneakers do not have. The LeConte Lodge at the summit is charming and regularly unreachable because the approach trail has converted itself overnight into something requiring equipment no one packed. The mountain does not look dangerous from the valley. That is precisely how it keeps collecting victims. Number 14. Guyandotte River, West Virginia. The Guyandotte doesn't have the fame of the New River. It doesn't appear in whitewater guides the same way. That relative obscurity is part of why it belongs on this list. The narrow hollows, feeding the Guyandotte funnel rainfall with a speed that transforms prediction into guesswork. When a storm drops significant precipitation into the headwaters, communities downstream don't have hours to prepare. They have minutes if they're paying attention. The 2001 flooding of Mingo County killed people and erased hundreds of homes in a matter of hours. Flash flood warnings issued along the Guyandotte watershed carry a weight that regional emergency managers treat with corresponding seriousness. The hollows that channel water toward this river are intimate and beautiful in the way that much of Appalachia is intimate and beautiful. When the water rises, they become a pipe aimed directly at everything and everyone downstream. Number 13. Cumberland Gap, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Cumberland Gap is where 3 states converge and where American westward expansion passed through its most famous bottleneck. Daniel Boone walked through it. Hundreds of thousands of settlers followed him. The place carries historical weight that makes it feel cooperative, almost welcoming, in the way that important historical places sometimes do. The Pinnacle Overlook sits above the gap at 2,440 feet with views that justify the drive. The cliffs surrounding the overlook are sandstone, and sandstone in the southern Appalachians crumbles in the specific, unpredictable way that has claimed multiple lives from people attempting off-trail scrambles that looked manageable from 10 feet away. The drop is immediate. Cell coverage at the top is poor enough that emergency calls fail in the first several attempts. History made this place famous. Geography made it dangerous. The 2 facts exist simultaneously whether visitors account for both or not. Number 12. Big Sandy River, Kentucky and West Virginia. The Big Sandy marks the state line between Kentucky and West Virginia and sits at the center of one of the most flood-vulnerable watersheds in either state. The communities in this valley carry two compounding burdens simultaneously: geography that concentrates and accelerates floodwater through narrow valley bottoms, and economic conditions that limit both infrastructure investment and individual preparedness. In February 2025, catastrophic flooding through the Big Sandy watershed killed more than a dozen people. That event was severe. It was not historically anomalous. Decades of surface mining on the slopes above these valleys has compacted and destabilized terrain that once absorbed rainfall gradually. What the mountains used to hold, they now shed. The communities at the bottom receive the difference. The river doesn't distinguish between years with adequate preparation and years without it. It simply moves through. Number 11. Devil's Bathtub, Scott County, Virginia. Devil's Bathtub has accumulated more than 180,000 posts on Instagram. The photographs are genuinely beautiful. The reality that photographs cannot communicate is that reaching it requires multiple creek crossings on a trail that changes character dramatically after any upstream rainfall event, and that the swimming hole itself is enclosed by rock walls with no safe exit route when water levels rise. Multiple drownings have been recorded here. Multiple rescue operations have placed the responding personnel at serious risk in the process of recovering people who went in expecting a swimming hole and encountered a hydraulic trap. Scott County Emergency Services have issued public warnings about Devil's Bathtub repeatedly. The warnings receive significantly less engagement than the photographs. Number 10. Pond Fork Hollow and the Coal River Watershed, West Virginia. The Coal River Watershed sits above communities that were built when coal was the entire economy, and safety was a negotiation between operators and the mountain. Slurry impoundments, the earthen dams that hold coal waste suspended in water, sit above hollows throughout this region. The mathematics of what happens when one fails are not complicated. The water and waste, held behind a compromised impoundment, moves downhill through the hollow beneath it. In 1972, the Buffalo Creek disaster in Logan County demonstrated precisely what that mathematics produces. 125 people killed, over 1,000 homes destroyed, 16 miles of valley floor swept clean in a matter of minutes. Active impoundments still sit above populated hollows in this same region. The lesson is thoroughly documented. The conditions that generated it have not fully changed. Number 9. The Clinch River, Tennessee and Virginia. The Clinch River is one of the most biologically diverse rivers in North America. It harbors more species of freshwater mussels and fish than almost any comparable waterway on the continent, a distinction that speaks directly to the quality and complexity of the water system itself. That complexity is part of what makes the Clinch dangerous in its quieter sections. The river runs deceptively smooth in stretches where the subsurface current is pulling hard toward the next rapid. People wade into the Clinch where it looks still and find the bottom dropping faster than expected, the current asserting itself before any visual cue has communicated the problem. Drownings here are documented with a regularity that locals understand and visitors frequently do not anticipate. The Clinch looks approachable. That is its consistent advantage. Number 8. Breaks of the Sandy, Kentucky. Where the Big Sandy cuts through Pine Mountain, the gorges it carves give the water essentially no choice but to move fast, cold, and with subsurface energy that surface observation cannot accurately measure. The swimming holes in the breaks of the Sandy are among the most visited destinations in eastern Kentucky. They are also among the most consistently dangerous. The current beneath a surface that looks calm bears no relationship to what a swimmer encounters once below the visual plane. People wade into apparent stillness and are pulled toward the next rapid downstream by flow that was invisible from the bank. Multiple drownings occur here annually. The geography creates the danger. The geography is also what makes it beautiful. Both facts remain true at the same time every year. Number 7. Mount Mitchell, North Carolina. At 6,684 feet, Mount Mitchell is the highest point east of the Mississippi River. That elevation comes with a climatic reality that its visitor numbers do not fully reflect. The summit receives over 100 inches of precipitation annually. Wind speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour have been recorded there. Temperatures can drop from comfortable hiking conditions to life-threatening hypothermia in under an hour when a weather system moves through the high country. The spruce fir forest near the summit is dying from a combination of acid rain and insect infestation, leaving stands of bare ghost trees that give the high ridge an atmosphere that is neither decorative nor metaphorical. Hikers have died on Mitchell from exposure in every single month of the calendar year, including July. The summit is accessible by paved road, which is precisely the problem. People arrive in sandals, having driven to the top of the highest mountain east of the Mississippi, and find themselves above the tree line when the weather makes its decision for the afternoon. Number 6. Harlan County, Kentucky. Not every dangerous place in Appalachia is geological. Some are structural. Harlan County has appeared on lists of the most violent counties in the United States at intervals across most of the 20th and into the 21st century. The conditions that produce that distinction are not fully historical. The decline of coal removed the primary economic engine from a community whose geography had already limited the alternatives. Mountainous terrain compresses emergency response times and law enforcement coverage into fractions of what comparable populations would receive in different topography. Generational poverty and geographic isolation created conditions where systems that exist elsewhere for conflict resolution were either absent or ineffective, and where they remained that way across enough generations to become embedded in the social fabric. The bloody Harlan era of the 1930s, with its documented labor violence, is history. The structural conditions that shaped it are not fully past. The mountains that define Harlan County's isolation have not moved. Number 5. Pound Gap, Kentucky and Virginia. Pound Gap sits on the Pine Mountain crest, where Kentucky and Virginia share a border and where American history was written in blood more than once. In 1862, Confederate forces ambushed and massacred Union soldiers and civilians, crossing through the gap in what became one of the more brutal small-scale engagements of the Civil War in this region. The geography that made it a killing ground then is the same geography that makes it dangerous now. U.S. Route 23 carries heavy commercial traffic, including coal trucks, through a mountain pass with severe grade changes, sharp curves, and winter icing conditions that the road's design does not adequately handle. The crash history on this stretch is something locals track the way people track weather, not as a surprise but as a seasonal expectation. The mountain that funneled soldiers into an ambush in 1862 funnels trucks into guardrails today. It doesn't change its methods, only the vehicles. Number 4. The Gauley River, West Virginia. Every September, Summersville Dam releases water for its annual drawdown, and the Upper Gauley River becomes the most concentrated stretch of dangerous whitewater in the eastern United States. Over 25 miles, the river drops 668 feet. Pillow Rock, Lost Paddle, Iron Ring, Sweets Falls. These names were given not for atmosphere, but because people needed a way to identify which rapid had nearly ended their trip. More than 24 deaths have been recorded on the Gauley since 1968, and the majority of those victims were not beginners. They were experienced paddlers who encountered conditions where experience alone was not a sufficient margin. Commercial outfitters run the Gauley with guides trained specifically on this river's particular hydraulics, and those guides still carry stories that don't appear in promotional materials. The Upper Gauley in September is a place where the margin between a successful run and a fatal one is sometimes smaller than human reaction time allows. Number 3. Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1962, a coal seam fire ignited beneath Centralia, Pennsylvania. More than 60 years later, it is still burning. The fire spread through the underground mine networks beneath the town at a pace that surface observation could not track or predict. The ground above became unstable in ways that gave no warning before resolving themselves suddenly and completely. Sinkholes opened without precursor events. Carbon monoxide vented through cracks in the pavement and through basement walls. In 1981, a 12-year-old boy nearly disappeared into a sinkhole that opened beneath him in his grandmother's backyard. The hole was 150 feet deep. His cousin pulled him out before the edges finished collapsing. The government ultimately demolished most of the structures and relocated most of the residents. A small number refused to leave. The fire beneath them is expected to continue burning for another 250 years. Centralia is a geological emergency that operates in slow motion, permanently, indefinitely, and without a scheduled end. The ground there doesn't announce what it's about to do. It just opens. Number 2. The Appalachian Trail. The Appalachian Trail runs 2,190 miles through the most geographically demanding terrain in the eastern United States. It crosses Mount Mitchell's weather zone, the New River watershed, the ice problem on the Smokies high ridges, and dozens of exposed ridgelines where disorientation and weather exposure have killed people quietly and without drama. Between 1974 and the present day, more than a dozen people have been murdered on the trail. Dozens more have died from falls, exposure, and medical emergencies in terrain where rescue is measured in hours and sometimes in days. The AT's most consistent danger is not any single dangerous section. It is the authority that a well-marked trail appears to confer. The blaze on the tree communicates a path. It does not communicate weather, terrain stability, or the gap between what someone packed and what the mountain is about to require of them. In Appalachia, the trail is a suggestion. The mountains around it operate on their own terms entirely. Number 1. Eastern Kentucky's flood hollows, Pike County and beyond. The most dangerous place in Appalachia is not a single location. It is a system. In July 2022, at least 44 people died in eastern Kentucky during floods that swept homes off their foundations and moved through hollows so fast that warning systems could not communicate the scale before the water arrived. People who had lived their entire lives in these hollows, who knew every bend in the creek and every sound the river made, were still caught. The conditions that made July 2022 catastrophic were not anomalies. Decades of surface mining stripped the hillsides above these hollows of the vegetation that once slowed rainfall absorption. Compacted mine spoils shed water instead of holding it. Narrow, hollow topography concentrates runoff into channels that have nowhere to expand except downward and forward through the communities built at the bottom. The 1977 floods killed 26 people in the same general region. The 2010 floods, the 1957 floods. The cycle is not episodic. It is structural. The most dangerous place in Appalachia is any hollow in eastern Kentucky when the rain falls hard enough and long enough, and there are thousands of those hollows with houses in them, with families in them, with people who have no practical alternative to living exactly where they live. This is not a canyon with a trail map or a burning ghost town with a warning sign at the entrance. It is an address. It is thousands of addresses. And the combination of geography, poverty, stripped hillsides, and inadequate infrastructure that defines the danger has not been dismantled. It is still there, waiting for the next system to move through. That is what makes it number 1. So which of these places surprised you the most? And if you live in or near any location on this list, is there something here that deserves more attention than it is getting? Leave it in the comments. The most useful thing about a list like this isn't the ranking, it's the conversation that follows it. If this changed how you think about Appalachia, or if you want to see more geography that challenges what you thought you knew, subscribe and stick around. The next one is already waiting.